Hey everyone, I am Jill and welcome to my farm, Whispering Willow Farm. I am at my high tunnel this morning and as you can see, I've got all the things out here. And I want to talk to you guys about how to stay organized on your farm to be more productive. If you have been following me for any period of time, you know I am such a free spirit. I kind of just do what feels right. Organization is not my strong point at all. And so this is something that required me to be super diligent. But when I really kind of realized that this was a system I needed to put in place because it was affecting the production on my farm, I knew I had to get my act together because here we want to be as self-sufficient and self-sustainable as we can, meaning we want to grow a lot of our food, and my lack of organization was affecting that in a pretty negative way. And so I kind of buckled down and I gave myself a year to work through those systems and figure those out. Now those systems I have written down in my book, The Tiny But Mighty Farm, to hopefully help and guide you guys if you are on that journey of getting more organized yourself. But I wanted to kind of talk through some of the things I do and then walk through what I'm doing today because I think it might be helpful for you guys and it's a super cheap thing you can do. So one of the things that I'm doing to stay organized is I'm buying all of the notebooks. So I buy these in bulk online. They're pretty cheap. I have a lot of information on my iPad, but there's something very nostalgic to me about having paper records of things. I just have these visions of my kids going through all of my, handwritten notes for the farm and what I grew and like my personal experience with this. I also have this as far as cookbooks and recipes. I've got journals upon journals that hopefully one day my kids will just get to look back on and they'll really get to see my life through my perspective, and hopefully it will inspire and guide them on their journeys throughout life. And so this may not be for everyone, but for me it signifies so much more than a cheap dollar notebook. I just really love it. And so I have on here High Tunnel 2022 Fall and Winter, and so I'll do this based off of seasons, and essentially what I'm doing is High Tunnel, the year, and then what season. And so I kind of categorize spring and summer and then fall and winter. I'll do this for the cottage garden and I'll do this for the main raised bed garden. And it's kind of like I started off with, I'm just writing out my goal for these places each season because it keeps me really accountable. What are my goals? What do I want to see out of this? How much production am I wanting to get out of here? And then I'm really starting to go in and build out some of those things, but more so what I'm using these notebooks for. And I keep them in the places that they are designated for. So we have a rack out here in our high tunnel. I'm keeping this notebook on that rack, and as I'm noticing a variety struggling with pests, that's probably something I'm going to note down. Hey, this particular variety struggled with this pest more as to where this pepper, I didn't have that issue. And anything, any quality, good, bad, pest, disease, production, color, taste, I'm jotting all of that down in this notebook, and that way when I get ready to reorder seeds, I'm not having to guess and remember and go back through photos and photos on my phone to jog memory or go back and watch my own YouTube videos. I'm literally just grabbing the notebook from that specific season and I'm flipping through and saying, oh, okay, this pepper I really liked, this one I'm not going to grow again, and I can really just kind of build out what I plan on buying for the year, which really keeps me on budget. I tend to go a bit overboard on seeds, as I'm sure many of us can, but if we can pinpoint what did well and what we want to regrow and then really kind of limit those new things that we're adding in, I think it just helps us stay on budget quite a bit better. So then another thing I buy in bulk are clipboards. I keep these in all the greenhouses. I think they're really helpful. And what I have on here is just our crop plan. So I keep my crop plan on this, and I have my crop plan divided out into seasons. And so we have got fall 2022, we did spring, summer, fall, and winter. This is also something that I have put my crop plan in the book for you guys to kind of have an idea of how to lay out a crop plan. I do think it's super beneficial. It allows you to jot everything down on paper before you really have to commit to it when it is in the ground. And so here is kind of just a good view of what mine looks like. You can see we've scratched out, we added things, I'm adding different notes of when I needed to start things. And so really it's just a good reference to have. And so I'll keep this hung up in my high tunnel because essentially I'm just going to be able to reference this. And so it is the raised bed garden, which you'll see up here. And then we have our high tunnel down here. And then we also have extra space where we have put on the side here for winter squashes, which we've already put out beside our high tunnel. Alright, so you might ask, why is a crop plan helpful in staying organized? How does this increase production on your farm? Well, like I just mentioned, you can really lay everything out on paper, which is really ideal. And then it takes a lot of that guesswork out, right? I don't know about you, but there's been so many times I've come up with an idea or a plan in my head, and then when I come out to plant, whether it's in the high tunnel or the raised bed garden, I think, oh, well, where was that supposed to go? And it wasn't conducive to succession planting. Or maybe I put my garlic in a place not realizing that it was going to be this summer before I could harvest it, and I've really taken up a good chunk of that bed. And so for me, you really get to lay out on paper what is going to allow you to maximize your space the best, especially if you're working in a small space. You guys, we're on 4.3 acres, and to a lot of farmers, they would probably chuckle at that, right? We're kind of working in a small space, but the way we have our space laid out, we're really able to like maximize that because one, we're growing year round, and then two, because we have everything mapped out on paper, we can figure out where we can succession plant, where we can interplant and intercrop things, and we're just able to yield a lot out of it. So I do recommend, this doesn't have to be pretty. You guys just saw, it was literally just me and a pencil jotting some of this down and kind of what our beds looked like. This is helpful too, because instead of thinking about your farm season by season, you're able to do spring, summer, fall, and winter and really start thinking about your farm and growing year round, which if you're wanting to max out production, I think you should really start thinking about year round growing. If you're not, for me, it makes more sense to grow food year round. It takes less work out of me to grow year round than to only grow within one season and having to grow so much and preserve so much. For me, I can just gradually bring in produce when it's in season, harvest it, put it in cold storage, preserve it, ferment it, you know, freeze dry it, whatever. And so for me, growing year round has just been a massive game changer for us, but you definitely have to be organized on the front end of the season. This is one of those things that as you're transitioning into fall and winter, it's a really good opportunity to sit down, cozy with your coffee inside, and start jotting down a plan. All right, so now let's talk about this board you see behind me. Now, I have done an entire intensive video on how I created this and breaking it down. I will find that and link it. I'm gonna make something similar to this, but not as in-depth. So really what this is doing, we go by crop, seeding date, the size container that we're starting in, the number that we need to be at, whether we are transplanting it, direct seeding it, and notes, which is just like where on our farm we are direct seeding or transplanting these things out. We have it color coordinated by flowers, vegetables, things that we're selling. So you can see we get pretty organized. It's a little bit of chaos at the beginning of the season when we're doing this, but super, super conducive to staying organized throughout the season. And so now over here I have a blank one, and you're gonna get to fill this out with me for the fall and the winter. All right, so let's get busy started on this. Like I said, it's gonna be a little bit different. Some of the things that I'm keeping in my high tunnel throughout the fall and the winter are my crop plans, like I mentioned, my notebook. Things you don't see pictured here are a scale. I keep just a pretty cheap kitchen scale and then an actual scale that you or I would use to weigh all of my stuff. And so that is going to be a pretty important part of our organization. And so I'm going to put here, I'm going to put beside it fall and winter so I know when it is grown. Fall, winter 22. Alright, so then I'm going to put crop. I'm going to put yields. And then I'm going to put notes. So as you guys can see, this is much more simpler than the one over here. I'm not going into just a ton of detail, but I mainly want to know what is yielding and what is doing well. So the notes will be more specific in this notebook that I'm talking about, but this could be various different notes just as I'm thinking about it, as far as like, okay, this is gonna need insect netting, I'm gonna need to trellis this, I'm gonna need to treat this because it's prone to this pest or this disease. So the notes aren't more so like specific to the flavors and things like that. It's more just notes on things that I need to remind myself that need to be done for that specific thing. So I'm going to go through, draw a straight of a line as possible. This is not my strong suit. And then I'll leave quite a bit of room. So on the crop, we have got, let's see, we've got the charm cauliflower. We have got the cheddar collie, D purple, and then graffiti. Alright, so you guys kind of have a good idea of what I'm doing here. Now you can go through and get super organized and draw lines for these. For me, I'm less worried about this right here being super pretty, because this is just like for my own personal notes. This is something that we're starting. This is our seed starting organization, and that's just, we're starting for multiple plant cells. We're starting for a few different families, and so this needs to be a bit more organized and structured than this. For me, this is helping me be productive, because I am able, every time we harvest anything out of our high tunnel, I will put it on either that kitchen scale and weigh it, or I'll put it on the bigger scale, and I am able to really jot down and figure out, you know, last year I grew 127 pounds of cabbage, but I wasn't diligent on specific varieties. So that was between a red cabbage and then like a hybrid cabbage. This year we're growing a few different cabbage varieties. Like I've got 4 different cauliflowers here. I would love to know, out of all of these, which one specifically yielded more. We have 2 purple varieties. I grew 2 on purpose to see which one of those I liked the flavor the best of, which one yielded the most. And so you can see here, by just kind of staying organized with this and figuring this out, I'm definitely going to be able to just max out production, because I'm going to be narrowing down my selection of what makes sense and what grows best in my climate, and just grow that again next year. Or maybe I'm adding in some different things. We'll do something similar to this out in the raised bed garden for the spring and summer season. We are growing all heirlooms out there just for cooking, and so that's going to look kind of different, right? I'm not going to be as concerned about yields, because that's not my goal as production. My goal is to be able to cook and explore in the kitchen. So that one is probably not going to be crop yield and notes, right? I'm going to be probably having things like flavor. Those are going to be things that I am taking note of. And then obviously performance, that is important, not necessarily in the sense of yield, but just if it did well. So you can create something pretty similar to this. All in all, the whole investment of this was really cheap. I've got, you know, $1 for a notebook, 50 cents for for a clipboard, and these were my most expensive because they weren't just a dry erase board. These are glass boards. We'll have them hung up actually in the tunnel. And this is nice too, because if you have tasks that need to be done, you can write your task on here and set up timelines for yourself, essentially. So I know around seed starting season, we have, you know, this pretty mapped out on the seeding date. So I can come in here and look and say, okay, by this date, I need to have X, Y, and Z done, and it holds you accountable. And I know organization isn't always the funnest thing to think about if you're anything like me, but I have found that by putting in the few extra steps on the front end, it has honestly yielded me more food on the back end. So I wanted to share with you guys this tangible way that I'm staying organized on my farm that is going to just allow me to have a more productive farm in the long run. Hopefully you found something here today that you can implement on your farm that allows you to be more productive as well. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll talk to you soon.